Hi, I'm Bill Mowry. I'm with the Navigators Church Ministries Training and Development Team, and welcome to this training video on how to take a disciple-making history. I recently had to visit my doctor. I was having some bronchial issues coming on and coughing, all this kind of good stuff. And so one of the first things I did actually what the doctor did with me as I went into his office is that he took a kind of a brief medical history. In other words, he asked me some questions about my condition, about what's happened in the past, what have been symptoms before. He's trying to collect a history of this health, condition that I had. So why is he doing that? Well, by understanding my past, what conditions I've had previously, it can give him wisdom in diagnosing the present situation, giving me the right prescription, and so on, to kind of help deal with this bronchial condition that I had. Well, in a similar way, we want to take a disciple-making history of a pastor or a leader. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, one is that when we take a disciple-making history, it's a place of building rapport with a leader. We're not just trying to simply sell a program or a curriculum to somebody else. We want to really get involved with their lives, build rapport and trust with them, and to understand where they're coming from in this whole area of disciple-making. And so taking a simple history helps me to do that. Taking a disciple-making history, is built around the idea of asking some key questions. And questions are really an integral part of how the Lord deals with us. Have you ever noticed how, like right in the beginning in the Genesis accounts, the Lord's first interactions with Adam and Eve are a series of questions. He says, well, where are you, Adam and Eve? Then he asks them, well, who told you that you were naked? And then he says, what is it that you've done? He asks questions. In Jesus' teaching ministry, it's recorded that he asked over 300 questions of men and women that he encountered in the gospel accounts. Now, why is it that Jesus asked questions? Well, Jesus was different from you and me in that you and I ask questions to kind of collect information because we don't know things about people. Well, in Jesus' case, he understood what was in the heart of men. And so he's not collecting information because he doesn't know something. He's really asking questions so the other person discovers some things. So what was Jesus' purpose in asking questions? Well, as I thought about it, I think there's kind of three things that Jesus wanted to accomplish. One is he asked questions to build rapport with people. When we ask questions of others, there's a sense of respect that I want to get to know you because I'm asking a question. I want to build a relationship with you. This is more than communication being a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And so it is with Jesus, that he will ask questions to get to know the other person. Secondly, is that Jesus asks questions to force us to think, right? He's not collecting information for himself. He wants to challenge us in our thinking process. And I'd suggest a third reason that Jesus asks questions is a lot of times he's forcing us and forcing the people that he talked to kind of self-assess their spiritual condition. It helps them to discover where they are in their spiritual journeys. And so questions then, as we use them, is not so much, to pass judgment or to criticize or to critique, but it's to build a relationship, it's to cause people to think, and it's to promote a sense of self-awareness or self-understanding of where people are in the disciple-making process. Now let me share four simple principles, kind of rules you might say for leading a disciple-making history. One is that be careful not to interrogate. Don't interrogate. The purpose is not to criticize. The purpose is not to detect a crime. The purpose is simply to build rapport, asking questions to help you understand where this pastor or leader is coming from in an area of disciple-making. So don't interrogate. Second is be prepared. Identify your questions ahead of time. In fact, a lot of times I'll send the pastor the questions in this disciple-making history ahead of time so that he or she has some time to reflect upon them. We're going to briefly go over these questions, and they're listed in your training outline in terms of specifically what the questions are. So be prepared. Thirdly is ask open-ended questions rather than closed-ended questions. An open-ended question is one that cannot be answered by a yes or a no. Closed-ended questions have to be answered by a yes or a no. In other words, an open-ended question can be, well, tell me a little bit about your experience in discipling others. See, that's open-ended. He or she can give a lot of responses to that. If I ask the questions, well, how many people have you discipled in the last year? That's kind of a closed-ended question. He has to be either one or two or maybe no. doesn't, it's not an open-ended question. It's really a closed question. So ask open-ended questions, and we're going to give you some open-ended questions to ask. Kind of the fourth little rule is to listen and then to clarify what people are saying. Be curious about their responses. If they say that, boy, I took a course in seminary on disciple making, you can ask the open-ended question as a result of their response. Well, tell me a little bit more about this course that you took. What were some of the goals in the course? How has this course helped you in discipling people right now? Do you see how by listening, being curious about their answer, asking some open-ended question, it gets you further into the conversation with that pastor or that leader? So now it comes down to conducting the interview. You're sitting in the office. You've agreed ahead of time that we're going to take this little disciple-making history. It's going to be in a little bit of an interview format. And how do you get it started? Well, a simple thing that I use is that, well, pastor or leader, as I talk with people about disciple making, I discover that, kind of everybody has this broad spectrum of experiences and training in disciple making. Some people have had no experience in training, and others are really skilled practitioners in disciple making. So we conduct this little disciple making history just for me to understand, and I think probably as a result of our talking together, it'll increase your awareness as well of your skills, your vision, and your motivation in discipling others. So let me just ask a few questions just to kind of get it started. Now here's some possible questions to ask, and these are listed in your training exercise. One is that, well, what's been your experience in discipling others? And so that, again, that's an open-ended question to allow them to give me some feedback on how they've been discipling others. What training have you received? Again, another open-ended question. How would you describe a disciple? This is a great question to get them to unpack, and so that, we can begin talking about, as I say, apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. Because he or she may have a very different understanding of what a disciple looks like than the one that you're operating from. Now again, we've provided a list of about 8 questions you can ask in the training piece, and I would write those down, even send them to the pastor or the leader ahead of time so that they know what's in this agenda of your talking together. Now, as people answer the questions, again, as we talked earlier, be curious about the answers. Ask some additional questions for them to clarify or for them to illustrate. The goal, remember, is not to interrogate, it's not to detect some inadequacy that they have, but it's to rebuild rapport and to build understanding between you and the pastor or the church leader that you're talking with. What you want to do is you're trying to establish kind of their current reality of where they are in disciple making, so that in time you can begin to help them identify their desired future, and then you can begin to share how the things that the training and the help that you can provide can be that action step that bridges the gap between their current reality and their desired future. These are all good coaching principles, aren't they? Now, this little interview I found usually lasts about 30 minutes. If there's an interest to go further, ask the leader if you can come back and to give him, you'd like to have him look at this little 10-minute assessment, and that's where you can use the train illustration, the train assessment, to help him identify kind of where his church is in disciple making. I'm always trying to think about how do I get another conversation with the pastor. The more conversations we have, the greater the trust and the rapport that we have together. So have fun taking this disciple-making history. See it as a time not to sell something, but to build a rapport, helping a pastor understand his or her current reality so that you can begin to paint a picture of what disciple-making could be, what the desired future could be in disciple-making, so you can come along as the Lord allows and begin to offer him some practical help to move from his current reality to his desired future. Have fun talking with people about a subject that's near to our hearts and is obviously near to the Lord's heart.